You may have watched Solo Sikoa thinking, oh my gosh, we have the successor to the great Umaga.
Everyone will acknowledge me.
But for some time now, one might get the impression that he is on the path to losing all his aura and becoming just another wrestler in WWE. Yet, the potential is there. What happened? Were mistakes made? Was Sikoa not ready for a solo spotlight? What is the problem? Grab a little coffee, settle in comfortably, and let's talk about it together.
A more aggressive family.
You are on the Wrestling Paradise.
And why am I afraid that WWE will completely waste Solo Sikoa? Let's go. So before claiming to be the new leader of the tribe, Solo Sikoa had quite a journey that deserves a little attention. So, we all remember the intervention of the Discord on the day of his first official appearance. I am of course talking about Clash at the Castle 2022. We were still at a premium live event of the utmost importance, Roman Reigns against Drew McIntyre in Cardiff, so a bit on Drew's home turf. He was about to win in front of fans, which had been his great quest for months and months and months. But then someone appears, pulls the referee's leg, and prevents Drew from winning. At that moment, I personally wondered, what on earth is this? He knows, especially since the Usos were banned that day. And in reality, he had taken off his hood, and it was Solo Sikoa. So at that moment, what could we imagine? Roman Reigns and the Bloodline have a new henchman, a new enforcer, as they are called. And for those who were already following NXT 2.0, it was still a familiar face. He is still the little brother of T, Usos, making him a cousin of Roman Reigns as well. Everything was in place in terms of legacy and DNA for him to effectively join the Bloodline and be part of this great storyline. And that's what happened in the first few months, let's say, of Solo Sikoa. In the main roster, basically, we had a Solo who spoke little. He was intimidating. Personally, I think it was quite good. That was the way he should have been used at the beginning, as someone who was threatening, expressionless, and who also used the brilliant move of the Samoan Spike, which is Umaga's move after all. So it was a very nice way to pay tribute to one of their ancestors, so to speak. He also won the NXT North American Championship in September 2022, so we can say that all of this showed a strong Solo Sikoa, and we could envision great things. Potentially, one day, well, we imagined that sooner or later there would be trouble in the Bloodline and rivalries among them. Well, that's what happened later, but at that moment, in any case, we could envision great things. He was booked strongly. From his first months in WWE, at least from the time when it really started to matter, he was part of the major storyline involving Zayn and Jey Uso, who joins whom, who is loyal to whom, who, let's say, contributed to pulling Jey. Solo was at the center of it all, so it was still an important position, a prime spot for him. What a better way to start, I want to say, well, we should note that on the road to WrestleMania 39, at the beginning of 2023, he was still losing to Cody Rhodes, even though he had been quite protected in the months prior, let's say. But well, we won't hold it against them. It was also to highlight Cody in view of his match against Roman Reigns. What can we also take away from all these first months of Solo Sikoa in the main roster? It's mainly the tag team matches he had in the premium live event, particularly two that I would like to talk about a bit more because they are truly worth mentioning. The first we remember, Night of Champions 2023. He is teaming up with Roman Reigns in an attempt to win the tag team title from Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, because, as you surely remember, on the night of WrestleMania 39, Zayn and Owens defeated the Usos and won the tag team title that had been monopolized by the Usos for quite some time. And so, Roman had decided, as he often does as the chief of the tribe, to succeed where the Usos had failed with Solo Sikoa. Except that, we remember, it leads to the famous betrayal, Jimmy Uso turning against Roman. And all of this leads, let's say, to the second very important match in Solo Sikoa's career at that time, the Bloodline Civil War. July 1st, 2023, Money in the Bank, a match of the utmost importance, a match, let's say, very familial, where it is truly a war. Among the members of the Bloodline, we remember the historic pinfall of Jey Uso on Roman Reigns, who officially became the first to pin Roman Reigns since he became the head of the table, and during his legendary reign. And Solo Sikoa, in all of this, still had an important place. So, one might find that he perhaps deserved, that he perhaps should have had more opportunities as a solo performer. A mid-card title in the main roster, why not? But what I can't take away from WWE at that moment, you can tell me if you agree with me, is that they took their time before really pushing him as a solo performer. So it's an inevitable play on words here with Solo. What is it necessarily? And it's certain that they have been patient. They initially gave him progressive tag team matches, essentially pairing him with Roman Reigns in the most important matches he had. All of that eventually led after a while to what was his first big solo match, his first match in a PLE all by himself. And finally, one might say that it took them a year and a bit to have this matchup, since we first see him at Clash at the Castle 2022 in September, and it is only in November 2023 that he achieves his first major victory against none other than John Cena. While he had primarily played the role of a henchman who intervened a lot, it must be said that Solo Sikoa was, well, it's not his fault, it's the booking. But despite himself, he was often involved in matches and in some pretty heavy moments, whether you like it or not. But that's the whole problem with a faction like the Bloodline. Sooner or later, you know that Solo Sikoa, Jimmy, and Jake, when they were still all under Roman's control, would intervene sooner or later. But still, I have to say, I must admit that waiting so long to give him a real first solo match, and thus a significant dominant victory with multiple Samoan spikes against John Cena, was still good. It was still good. We took the time to build someone really strong, intimidating, and at that moment, we could imagine a lot of things. Especially since there was a promo at the end of 2023 where Roman Reigns designated Solo Sikoa as his tribal heir. And this obviously led him to consider that he would take over from Roman Reigns when Roman decided either to leave, to retire, or to take a break. Who would be the successor, the officially designated successor? For him, this was still a dream scenario. You put yourself in his shoes. You have one of the greatest of all time and the modern-day superstar, Roman Reigns, who acknowledges you, let's say, that he recognizes you himself. Like his successor, who validates him in the eyes of the whole world, I want to say. So we could imagine many beautiful things. Next, it is said that he maintains his role as an enforcer, a henchman, until WrestleMania 40, where we recall his intervention during Night 2, the main event between Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes. This second match was marked by multiple interventions, turning it into a chaotic war where he intervened. But in this case, he hadn't really had the chance to shine, as he had been put in his place by John Cena. But still, it was, all things considered, a spot in the most important match of the year. It's not something given to just anyone, and it should be noted, well done Solo Sikoa for that. At least, it was a nice progression while waiting to have a real match and a true showcase at the Showcase of the Immortals. But since then, what has happened? Because that's the heart of the problem. So far, the rise, the creative way of using him, not bad at all, patient. But since then, that's where I see a big problem. There is a big problem. Basically, we know that Roman Reigns loses at WrestleMania and loses his title. And it is Cody Rhodes who becomes the new champion, the new face of the company. Roman Reigns is absent. At that moment, it should still be noted that we did not know how long Roman Reigns would be gone. So, there were news that he was filming a movie. There was also the idea that he might possibly retire. That wasn't out of the question. Well, after all, one shouldn't be naive. He was still going to end up coming back, at least before the next WrestleMania. Especially since the whole story had been set up with The Rock for them to eventually face each other. So, one could say, he will definitely come back, Roman, obviously. But at that moment, there was still a bit of uncertainty around him. It was during this time that WWE really decided to put a lot of emphasis on Solo Sikoa. And how did that translate concretely? This translated to him saying, I am basically the new chief of the tribe. He therefore allows himself to give orders, to behave like a leader, and even to clash with Roman at times by saying that now he is in power, to summarize, with also some new followers. And all of this leads to, so specifically, what has he had as, let's say, a truly remarkable element in this entire journey? It should be noted, by the way, at Backlash, he still managed to defeat Randy Orton and Kevin Owens alongside Tama Tonga, still as a team, but nonetheless defeated. Next, at Money in the Bank, still in a team, he defeats Cody Rhodes, Kevin Owens, and Randy Orton alongside Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga. And at that moment, especially what is really very notable is that overall, I find that his potential seems to be unfortunately being wasted. I can still admit that having the privilege to take down the champion, Cody Rhodes, at Money in the Bank is quite remarkable. So obviously it wasn't completely clean, but still he comes out of it very strong. And at that moment, he is in an ideal position to challenge Cody Rhodes at SummerSlam. This would represent, let's say, after Sikoa in November 2023, his second big solo match. And I have to say, I appreciate that. Personally, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I appreciate that matches featuring Solo Sikoa on, let's say, PLEs, on the big stage, the ultimate stage, are rare. Crown Jewel 2023, SummerSlam 2024, we take our time. And at that moment, he will challenge Cody Rhodes. And honestly, could we really believe that he was going to beat Cody Rhodes and end his reign since WrestleMania? Well, on one hand, there was still some suspense thanks to the outcomes at Money in the Bank, which was a really effective way to add even more excitement to this matchup. But as we know, at SummerSlam he loses because of Roman Reigns making his return. That's it. So, during all those months when Roman Reigns was not there, Solo Sikoa has risen in stature, has established himself, let's say, as the new chief of the tribe. And I find it quite brilliant on WWE's part, purely this aspect, is that by constantly claiming to be the new leader, blah blah blah, he has indirectly allowed, even if it was perhaps his role, for people to, they want the return of Roman Reigns, that Roman Reigns is missed by the fans, even though he is supposed to be a heel, and he is supposed to be hated by the fans. And some fans, I still remember, we shouldn't be hypocritical and forget that during a whole period of Roman's reign, some fans, a whole part of the fan base, and it could be heard, because it's true that sometimes the booking was heavy, predictable, always the same. I admit, sometimes even as a huge fan of Roman Reigns, sometimes all this to say that despite moments of unpopularity during his reign, thanks to Solo Sikoa, everyone was almost, I want to say, eagerly awaiting the return of Roman Reigns, and that is what happened at SummerSlam. And there, you can still say Solo Sikoa did lose to Cody Rhodes, but he was still protected because it is clearly due to Roman that he lost. And all of this culminated in a steel cage match for the title still against Cody Rhodes in what was season 1 of SmackDown on USA, September 13th, 2024. And for me, so we will see what the future holds for us. Nothing is ever set in stone in WWE. You can always catch up. You can always regain momentum. Anything is possible. But for me, I still feel that there has been a turning point because he is in a cage match, and one can consider that just as Cody Rhodes had defeated him on the road to WrestleMania 39 before, once again, he loses to Cody Rhodes. And honestly, there is no possible contestation here. He loses cleanly in a cage against Cody Rhodes. And he looks weak. He looks weak. He did exist in this match. It wasn't one-sided at all, fortunately, but still. I still find that we end up with a Solo Sikoa who has clearly been defeated without any possible dispute by Cody Rhodes. And now we have a lot of questions. Honestly, seeing this, we wonder, is Solo Sikoa still as protected? Why have him lose so decisively when he is supposed to be the new tribal chief and is meant to be very threatening? And while we know that sooner or later he will have a match against Roman Reigns, we can imagine it one-on-one. It's inevitable. Why do that? Is it because WWE and Triple H might believe a little less in Solo Sikoa? Or is it simply because there is really no consistency? As has happened before, we know that in WWE, unfortunately, they appreciate, or rather, they do, perhaps even without realizing it, a 50-50 booking. Or sometimes, a guy wins, the next time he loses, where there is a bit of a lack of coherence and stability. One might think that there is some truth to that, but I find it makes no sense to weaken Solo Sikoa now, at the time when Roman Reigns has returned, when he needs to be more credible than ever to truly represent a significant threat against Roman Reigns and really be able to look him in the eyes and say, "No, my friend, no, my Roman. Now I am the chief of the tribe, not you anymore." And to be credible in saying that or exhibiting that behavior. But with this loss to Cody Rhodes, what can we say now? We can say he can say whatever he wants. Solo Sikoa, he did not succeed where Roman Reigns had also failed. Both Roman and Solo lost to Cody Rhodes in title matches and more. One could even say, sorry Roman, but at WrestleMania 40, he still came out quite strong. It took numerous interventions and multiple finishes before he lost. And it also took a distraction from Seth Rollins at a crucial moment. Whereas there, at SmackDown in the cage, frankly, it was much less, let's say, a loss from which he came out strong or grew. It was much less that. One could still say that there is a way to make up for this. Can you imagine that in a few weeks, or at some point, Solo Sikoa could have a significant victory against Cody Rhodes in a one-on-one match? It would be a catch-up, it would be a 50-50 booking, as I mentioned just before, but it would restore his credibility. But right now, my big concern for Solo Sikoa is that he is becoming less and less credible in this whole story. And above all, unfortunately, he also hides, which was part of the major shortcomings for me during Roman Reigns' reign, which is nonetheless magnificent and historic. And above all, Roman Reigns, what a champion, what a legend already. Despite everything, it was the fact of having multiple interventions, often having that particular twist, having Tama Tonga and Jacob Fatu involved. So certainly, the advantage is that he also, by recruiting new members, he has created a new bloodline, which opens up quite a few creative possibilities. One might also wonder if Solo Sikoa was actually just following the orders of the true leader of the tribe, secretly, which is The Rock. It's possible. It is obviously possible that all of this could eventually lead to Roman Reigns against The Rock. But what are the concrete creative possibilities? There are tag team matches. Thanks to Solo Sikoa, who brought back the kayfabe, new members of the Bloodline can all face either Roman or Cody in one-on-one matches. It's possible. So, we can still acknowledge that thanks to him, there are new members of the Bloodline, and it may not even be over yet. Who knows? Maybe we'll see Umaga's son, Zilla Fatu, soon. I hope Zilla Fatu will eventually debut in WWE. But anyway, as we look ahead, one might still be worried, and that will be my final word. One could be concerned thinking that Solo Sikoa is already losing credibility due to a clean loss against Cody Rhodes. He could also soon be defeated by Roman Reigns in a singles match. So the question is, when will this match between Roman and Solo, which has been built up, take place? We remember that even during the Bloodline Civil War, and even in the weekly shows starting in 2023, there were sometimes small moments where we felt a certain something that was not far from turning against Roman, who was a bit unpredictable, somewhat like a wild beast. And let's say that some initial elements were already being presented. So, is all of this simply going to lead to a loss against Roman Reigns in a one-on-one match? Or is it, on the contrary, that ultimately the way to restore his credibility when the time comes will be for him to win? For good, the one he claims to be the successor, Roman Reigns. It's possible. It's possible. And finally, isn't it, let's say, in the coming months, the scenario to avoid Solo Sikoa falling into anonymity and being of no use? Would a victory in a one-on-one match against Roman Reigns help? So maybe not right away. Maybe it's better to wait until Roman Reigns has had his inevitable rivalry first. And personally, I am looking forward to it, even though I can understand that some may be looking forward to it a little less. It all depends on whether the title is at stake and, of course, on the manner in which it happens. But in any case, one could say that Roman Reigns must first have his story with The Rock, and perhaps at that moment, Solo Sikoa will need to defeat Roman Reigns to be fully recredible. And maybe that's the answer. He needs a one-on-one victory against Roman for everything to build up. Since the fall of 2022, it hasn't been for nothing. You now know my opinion on Solo Sikoa, who should really be booked better to avoid falling into obscurity. Come and let me know in the comments if you also think he has immense potential, or if on the contrary, you are not a fan of him. What booking would you do for him? I also encourage you to propose discussions of all kinds. Who knows, maybe I will make a video about it very soon.
We can say that this topic raises a lot of questions. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay in the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line. The Stone Cold Censor. What?